Good to see you.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Want to talk some watches? Maybe change it up from the business a little bit?
I love these watches, and they're part of my collection.
Well, let's jump into this.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, we're in my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio, but I'm joined by a special guest, Kevin.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Change of pace today, though. We're talking about watches.
Yep.
Talking about watches, and thank you for bringing all your watches here.
Some of my watches.
Some of your watches.
Right.
All right. Well, let's go through them a little bit. But
Okay.
first, to kind of start off, it's about 3 or 6 months ago.
Yep.
I saw you posting a little bit more about watches. You probably had this fascination prior to that.
Yes.
But how did this all start? When did you start kind of getting into watches?
When I was young, my father, who'd been traveling around the world as an ILO executive, part of the United Nations, decided to settle in Geneva, Switzerland.
Okay.
And so at the age of 7 years old, we used to walk the streets, you know, in Geneva, and obviously that's the cradle of the watch industry. Omega, for example. My first watch ever that I got, I was so fascinated with the moon landing that I had one of the original moon watches from Omega. And that movement went through many, many changes over the years. And obviously it's been perennial. They just relaunched it after the 50th.
321, yep.
Right. And so, you know, I started to get interested in it, and then as I got into entrepreneurship and started buying and selling companies, I got into the habit of buying a watch every time I closed a deal, that I couldn't buy another one until I had success in a transaction. And my collection began to grow and grow and grow, and I got into AP and Rolex and Patek Philippe and then more eclectic watches, and the collection grew. And then till one day in Boston, someone broke into my home and cleaned me out. I lost everything. And that was one of 2 times I've lost my entire collection. And I started rebuilding, and the next one I built also got stolen through an inside job. Now, this collection you're seeing here, I have my collection in multiple cities. I don't disclose how many I own. I don't disclose where they are anymore. I just carry watches with me because I'm so fascinated with them.
I was very surprised. I was expecting you not to bring any, so this is
Yeah.
a nice surprise for me. So maybe walking through some of your watches here, in terms of which ones kind of you're just collecting journey in general. Where did you go first? How did this kind of all pan out for what we're looking on the table currently?
Well, this very small Cartier, which is a
yep.
very old watch, they don't make it anymore with the, you know, steel and gold with triple gold. You always find it only with 2. This was part of my original, as I like to say, collection. This was the first watch that I got on my first deal, and I only could buy it secondhand. And, you know, my wife, who wasn't even married to me at that time, when I started dating her, I was wearing this watch. She said, "Kevin, that's not really a man's watch." And I said, "It can be. There's a larger face, but I like it because it represents a certain time in my life." This was stolen in my first collection. It took me 17 years to find another one. They are very, very hard to find. I had dealers all over the country looking for it. I also looked for my original. But this is a very emotional watch for me, and this is the thing I want to talk about with watches.
Yeah.
You bond with them. They become, you know, they have their own souls, and you have to wear them, and they live together in collections. But when I put this on, when we went to pick it up in New York at Tourneau, Linda was with me, and she actually started crying when she saw it. It was really powerful. And so now I wear it very often, and it's part of. People look at it and say to me, "Are you sure you should be wearing a face that small?" And the fact that we're having the conversation about it means the watch is a success already.
It proves itself.
Exactly.
It proves itself.
Now, obviously, there's a lot of different. My latest addition to my collection is this incredible, and this is a very controversial piece. The new AP Series 1159, as you well know.
Yep.
You know, this terrain face is stunning. This is
Yeah,
the
the perpetual
1150.
calendar is my favorite of this new collection. Absolutely.
It's a remarkable crystal as well. You can see when you take a look at it from an angle.
Yeah, it almost dips in. It almost protrudes in.
It's extraordinary. Now, the big problem was when I looked at all of the 1159 collection,
Beautiful.
I said the one that interests me is the perpetual. First year they made 100. And I said, however, the only way I can take it from you is it has to have a red band. They said, "It's impossible." I said, "No, it isn't. Why can't we work together to agree on a tone of red that goes with the rose gold so this watch becomes, well, effectively one of a kind, but I will wear this when we're shooting Shark Tank this year. I'm going to match it with a certain pen that really reflects on what's going on in this incredible face. And then I went to meet with Montblanc and showed them this watch and said, I need to marry this with a one-of-a-kind pen, which is another part of the story.
For sure.
But ever since having got this and been wearing it of late, I've had remarkable conversations about it because it is quite a stunning piece on your wrist. There's no question about it. But, you know, it's not, if you look at a classic AP, you know, I mean, look, this is a big controversy, right? The octagon. You say, well, I don't see the octagon on the new 1159 or code 1159, and it's there. It still exists in the legacy case below the crystal. So to me, these are part of a family, but I just love these watches. And AP is so collectible and investable.
So we'll get on that in a moment.
Yeah.
So we have AP, we have Rolex represented, and Patek as well. What is it about these brands? I mean, looking at that, we have Daytonas, we have Sea Dwellers. I mean, what allows you to just gravitate towards these watches in general?
Well, first of all, I'm an investor. So the way I look at it is if I'm going to part with capital on a watch, I want the market to appreciate its value. And to appreciate its value, in other words, go up, you know that if you can find at retail, let's take something like this, a steel face white Daytona, which is, to me, perhaps the best balanced watch for a man or woman's wrist in the world. It is such a perfect watch in balance, in size, in look. Now, I've put a red band on here for obvious reasons. And
Are they obvious?
Well, you know, the thing about changing the band on a Rolex, which is controversial in itself.
Yeah. So when I asked the Facebook group, what question do you have for Kevin?
Right.
The first thing that come up, why the red bands?
Okay, so over the years of Shark Tank, I've always worn red bands. And I like the idea of watches as part of your style. So if you have, let's just put this back on, this amazing, well-balanced Daytona, black. You know, some people like the steel, I like the black. This ceramic black is spectacular, marries with the black suit. Here we have the red band. I want to point something out here. It's not any red band. I spent months talking to all the companies that make bands, particularly the tone of red, until I discovered Rubber B. Now, I have no financial interest in Rubber B. They don't pay me for anything. I basically want the integration to be perfect. You see no space against the bezel. Very, very hard to do that. And you can put the original clasp on so that you really you've married all the style elements of the watch. Red, accoutrement of red here. Then we'll take a pen like this. This is a Montblanc. It's actually a fountain pen. I use that on Shark Tank as well. Red, red, red against black. Do I look spectacular or what? I look fantastic.
What do you guys think? Leave comments down below.
Look, my whole point is you want to have some style. That's the whole idea that we're building on here. So what you're trying to do is find something unique to you that others don't have. And so if people want to be, you know, questioning my desire to put red bands on, the collection is all red, with the exception of the only watch I cannot put a red band on, because this band is really part of the original design of the 5711.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's the hottest watch in the world right now, right there.
Yes, it is, and it also appreciates in value so much. Now, if I can't tell you how many times, and I'll have this debate with you because I put out my video.
Let's talk about investments.
And you hit back right away.
Let's talk about it.
Now, let's take this watch. If you go to Chrono 24, which I think you think is controversial, I think the appreciation is over 120% on the watch. Now, you would say, well, how is it possible that you can buy this watch for whatever it is these days, $29,000?
$29,000, yep.
Yeah, and sell it for 80 or whatever they're going for right now. I don't even know. Every time I get on an international flight, okay, when I'm flying, let's say, from New York to Dubai or Riyadh or Geneva, I bet you at least 3 times I get a cash offer for this watch from passengers sitting beside me. So the idea that I can't monetize my gain, you're wrong.
I'm not saying you can't make money with watches. You absolutely can make money with watches. Question for you, though. In terms of what is your take on watches and investments? When you say that statement, I think watches, you can invest in watches, I don't necessarily disagree if you have the means to do it, but are you saying that as a blanket statement for everybody?
No. Okay. I'm saying if you're willing to do the work, to form relationships with dealers like London Jewelers or Tourneau or in Geneva or Riyadh, where you form a bond and you become a real investor. I mean, you're starting to you're writing checks. You're buying
Yes.
watches. And so if a new piece comes out and you know it's coming maybe in December, and you go to your dealer and say, look, I've been a fantastic client. I really want that piece. Maybe you get a little higher on the list because you've been supportive of the brand, you've been supportive of the dealer, and you are a spokesperson for why people should invest in watches anyway. So, you know, I sit down and I talk to both the CEOs of all these companies and their dealer networks, and I'm involved in the watch industry from the perspective that I believe it's a great investment for men from a style perspective and economic. My point is, if you're able to acquire at retail a highly desired watch, you can monetize that. It is a great investment. Now, if you do flip it, you'll probably get cut off.
Exactly. So where's the pay? So the problem I think for me is, and where my stance is, you can make money with watches.
Right.
Not going to debate it whatsoever. You also bring up another important point about to get these watches, to have an opportunity to get a 5711, you're already doing really good business with that AD.
Yes.
You have to probably already spent tens of thousands of dollars with that AD to even be considered to have an opportunity to get that watch.
Yes.
So that was the other barrier. Just the barrier to play in the game is high. And then two, the payout as well. It's hard to sell these watches, and when you do sell them, you're almost cutting off your opportunity to ever play in the game again with these ADs.
It's true. It's true. But, you know, the pursuit in life of things that you covet and love and means something to you, I could argue the same thing for high-end cars. I'm not a car guy. I don't need a Lamborghini and a Ferrari and 5 other cars. I'm a watch guy. Watches don't need a garage, they need a safe. That's what they need.
Yeah, that's right.
But, you know, it's sort of, you find something you're passionate about. I spend hours, and here's the point I want to make. Yes, they're expensive. Yes, it's a large allocation of capital. But I'm immersed in a culture where I can spend, like you and I are talking about watches because we love it.
It's a romantic idea. There's
Right.
there's really nothing logical about this.
There is
concept.
nothing.
But
But you know, I wouldn't be caught dead with an electronic watch on. I'm not a robot. I'm not like the other 50,000 people. I tell people when I see them, I don't even mention a brand, any of these electronic watches, they have lost 50% of their value when they walk out of the store.
You're talking about these smartwatches.
Yes,
Yes.
they bought a piece of consumer electronic crap. There's no style to that. You look like everybody else. I say to them, why would you do that to yourself? Why in the world would you put on a piece of consumer electronics and have it diminished in value? When you walk in a room and you meet somebody for the first time, you don't know if they're a watch collector or not, and they look at your wrist and they see a spectacular piece. If they look at your wrist and they see an electronic watch, you're trading at 20% off retail and you haven't even said a word yet. I mean, that's what style is about. And so, to me, I'm very passionate about it. I get into all these huge debates with people about it. I mean,
It's a self-expression element. It's an embodiment of who you are on your wrist that you can take with you. And like you say, if you're getting a luxury car, you're getting any other kind of luxury good, if you buy it right, you can retain that value and have fun while you're kind of retaining that value and going up.
Let's talk about this piece. This is a Hulk.
You got the Hulk, bring it up.
You probably will never see a Hulk with a red band on it.
It looks like Christmas time, personally.
Exactly. You know, if Arnaud, the CEO of Rubber Bee, I walked in, I said, Arnaud, I need to put a red band on this green Hulk. He said, no. I said, put it on because I have to wear it on the Shark Tank set. I want to bring it into my collection and I want to wear it on the set. He said, it's going to look like a Christmas tree. And I said, so what? So what? I brought it home. My wife said, that looks like a Christmas tree. People around the room said, it looks like a Christmas tree. And
Okay,
again,
so I'm not the first person to say
we're
that.
talking about the watch for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It's a monster success when people see it and say, I want to talk about that. I don't agree with it. I agree with it. I think it's fantastic. I hate it. That's when the watch becomes the center of attention, which is exactly what the timepiece is supposed to do.
So when you wear a watch, you want to be able to talk about it. You want to get somebody's attention necessarily? Is that kind of what you're
There
going for?
is no piece in my collection right now that gets more people stopping me on the street than this green Hulk with the red band. They go nuts in
bet.
either direction, 50-50. I hate that. You've bastardized the watch. You should be put in prison. And others say that is so spectacular, so unique, so eye-catching. I love it. That's what I love about doing this. Now, I still have the original band for it, so, you know, although I have to tell you, I'm probably going to put all these in my coffin. I'm taking them with me to the afterworld because my son was looking at these saying, Dad, do you have the original band for the Hulk? I said, why are you asking, Trevor? He said, I really like that watch. I said, don't think about it. It's coming, it's coming with me to the afterworld.
So you're not going to give any of these watches to anyone?
Well,
you're going to take them?
You're bringing up a really interesting topic. So what I'm starting to do now with my business partners, when I get involved in a large transaction with somebody and we've both invested together and we've had success, I will often take the next collectible that I'm going to be receiving, that I've been waiting for a year or whatever, and gift that watch to them for one singular reason. Once you pass 25 watches in your collection, you got a big problem. Because here's my rule. I don't put watches in boxes and stash them in a safe. Every watch is a living, breathing soul. That means I have to spend time taking it out, winding it, putting it to the right time and date, putting it on my wrist, and wearing it at least 3 times a month. Big problem. You know, you start getting past 15, 16,
My
17.
sweet spot is 12. If I can wear it once every 2 weeks,
Yeah.
I think that's a good sweet spot for me. And it's hard. But
I
it
will
makes you be very
sometimes
thoughtful.
change my watch twice a day.
I will as well.
Yeah.
More than that.
The problem is when you get past 25, what do you do? And that's where now, you know, I try and work with the collection and say, okay, I've got a lot of Daytonas, I've got a lot of Rolex, I've got APs, and gift a piece to somebody. And my wife has been driving me crazy trying to take they call this, you know, the white Daytona is called the girlfriend watch. You lend it to her for a day, you never see it again. This looks so great on a woman's wrist.
The proportions of that 40 millimeter case, and it's very compact in the lugs compared to a lot of, you know, you say like the Sea Dweller or even the Submariners, like that
You're
super
right.
case. It's way more compact. I think that's why it's demanded so high. It's the
Well,
hottest Rolex.
Let's look at the jeans and t-shirt viability of something like this. What's your take on a piece this big?
It's not for me. I'm a small wrist guy, so I'm wearing an Explorer 2. This is 40 millimeters. This is from 1999.
Classic.
Yeah, it just suits me.
It's a spectacular piece, there's no question about it. But if you're going to experiment into the new pieces Rolex bringing, by the way, the movement in this is really spectacular. You don't have to wind it for almost a week.
It's 70-hour power reserve, I think.
Yeah, I know, but I just noticed the other day, I put it away 4 days ago,
Yeah.
still had the time on it.
Yeah.
It's an amazing, amazing watch.
Yeah, Rolex updated all their movements in the last
Yeah,
couple of years.
and I think that's what I like about the company, which is really a trust. It's not a truly for-profit
That's true. That is true as
entity.
well.
But, you know, even for my wrist, it still makes a great statement. With a black suit, it's spectacular.
And the great thing about the Sea Dweller is so many people, I think, hound Rolex for saying they lost their sense of being a tool watch brand.
Yeah.
The Sea Dweller is still the embodiment of a tool watch in the modern day. So I will say that.
It has the nitrogen release valve still.
Yeah, the helium release valve. Yep.
I mean, you know.
Integrated with the case, which I like. It's not poking out, so
No,
it
it's
still
not.
looks
It's
discreet.
beautiful. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it has a certain je ne sais quoi and style to it. So I don't have a problem. Then marrying it to something like this is a classic pen that was designed in the 20s. It is actually a fountain pen, a stiletto fountain pen. Look at that.
This is a world I'm ignorant in.
That is a Mont Blanc collectible stiletto fountain pen.
The edging on the tip,
Isn't that beautiful?
the great thing about watches, I think, when you see great ones, you can recognize greatness and attention to detail in a lot of things. And I think that's one thing I'll say about watches. They do give you appreciation for
It
other high
marries
quality things.
beautifully to that Sea Dweller. Or you could take a Virginia
Yeah.
Wolf, a highly collectible Mont Blanc. This is actually a ballpoint. How perfect is that? I mean, there's so many different ways to go when you're thinking about the accoutrement from the collection. You're saying, how do I build with, you know, maybe a cufflink like this, a skull cufflink silver, so you want a steel face. We're having fun here.
For sure.
I mean, it's sort of, to me, and then I get so much flack and so much emails about how could you put a red band on that, and why would you ever do that, and yada, yada, yada. And this piece, which is the only one in the world with a red band as far as I know, this one gets a ton of comments, both pro and con, because this is not an aftermarket band. This was one of a kind made by AP for me.
Directly from the manufacturer.
The debate went on for 4 months as we looked at different capes of alligator skin that they thought would marry to the rose, and I mentioned that earlier, but I think the work they did on this piece is perfect.
The red works a little bit more with that. I still wouldn't do it for myself, but it definitely works better on that than I think.
I have the original blue band, but it doesn't work for me if I don't have the option to make it a television watch, as I call it. I mean, it is, when I go with this, I put a gold tie pin on,
Yeah.
Tiffany Starburst solid gold cufflinks. With this watch, look spectacular.
So it sounds like we actually agree a little bit more than we disagree about watches as investments. I
Well,
think it's just the idea.
You just don't think there's liquidity.
Yeah, I mean,
That's-
I just think that there's a barrier to get into the game. I think is a detriment for most people, and I think there's just a better place to put your money. In my opinion.
Let's say, here's one way I like to do it. Let's say you've built a collection of 12, which you said was the ideal number. I kind of agree.
Yeah,
Once
it's a
you
good
get past
sweet spot.
12, you're really getting off into the stratosphere in
Yep.
terms of watches. I'm way past that. So it's just that when I get offered a very rare piece, I can't say no. That's the problem. And then I bring it home and my wife says, "Are you out of your mind? When are you going to wear that?" And I say, "Tonight for dinner. I'm going to wear it."
And what is that investment for? You talk about liquidity and paying the payout, or do you talk about the investment in
Well,
yourself, which I
so-
think honestly.
Yeah,
I can agree
I
with
am
as well.
investing in myself and my desire to own these watches, but I also do something that many collectors do that you do not agree with. So what I do is I take an app like Chrono 24, I get the spot price on the whole collection, excuse me, and I look at the mark to market each day of the whole collection. And yes, you could argue you couldn't monetize it that way,
Yes.
but I argue for half of them I could because they're so desired and hard to get. And I'm not yet in the vintage space, although I have to correct myself. I just recently bought
It's a whole other world. It's a whole other world.
Well, it is, but I bought a 79 movement, which is the best year I thought they ever made the moon watch, the Omega, and with the beautiful crisp sound of manually winding it.
The gears are still just sounding and firing.
Yeah, it's just so beautiful. And I wear that as well, and guess what? I have a red band on it. I didn't bring it with me because it's in another city. I've got the collection all over the world, so I'm never going to get ripped off again for the whole thing. And you know, I just think it's a good way to provide for having the watches when I arrive at a certain city. I've got a bunch waiting, and then I just go into a whole different style metric.
So let's talk about the business of watches.
Yeah.
I think it's a very interesting time for just the watch industry in general. Maybe talking from two fronts. For one, let's maybe play the game. You are a consultant for the day, or maybe you become the CEO of a brand that might be struggling. Maybe not like the brands that we see on the table, because I think all of these brands do something very well, which I'll get at a little bit later. But what would you do? What would you change day one if you're stepping in maybe as a position as a CEO or consultant for one of these brands that might not be front and center when it comes to retaining value, like some of the brands that we're seeing on the table?
It's a great question you're asking, because we have a living example of a very controversial move going on right now. First of all, let's see if you agree on this. The three pillars of the watch industry from a collecting point of view: Rolex, Patek,
Yep.
AP, right?
I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay, so let's start with that. So if you're going to be a collector, you're going to take pieces from each of those brands and build your collection with them. Now, what's remarkable, I remember walking the streets of Geneva 20 years ago, maybe even 17 years ago, and AP was not an El Supremo brand. It was up there, but it didn't have the je ne sais quoi that a Patek or a Rolex had. People would immediately go to one of those two brands for their first watch. Somehow, and this is extremely hard to do, in the last 15 years, AP has transcended itself to the equivalent of a Patek. How that happened is very hard to understand. There may be some, let's debate that, because I'm building a case.
I think they have sustained a relative, I mean, ever since the Royal Oak was invented in 1972, I think that it's been the backbone.
In 72, people poo-pooed.
That's right. That's
They
right. Just like the
poo-pooed
Code
it.
1159. I bet the Code 1159 is a perfect embodiment of what maybe the Royal Oak was at that point. That expensive for a steel luxury watch?
They hated it.
They hated it. I mean, it totally defied everything of that era, and also thinking about the quartz crisis of that era as well. So I think what I would contribute it to, I think, say the last 15 years, I think social media, and believe it or not, I think the rappers. I think, honestly, the mention.
I was going to
I
say,
think
in popular artists in
Yes,
music.
I
You're
think
right.
I think it's huge for pop culturally relevant brands are the ones that are succeeding. Even a brand, I think it's more of a flash in the pan, but Richard Mille. you talk about those 3 brands, but
Oh,
Richard
well,
Mille.
let's talk about that in a minute,
It's
because
very
that is a
interesting.
very important discussion to have. But let's finish
Yes.
our thought
Yeah,
about
please.
Okay, so we agree those are the pillars, and somehow AP has lifted itself to be on par with the other 2. Amazing that that happens, because I could argue today, many people will stop me with my jumbo AP on blue face and say, I have to have that watch. What do you want for it? I can't get it. What does it take? How did you get it? It's always the same conversation. My point is, there's a brand that has said in the last 24 months, we're going to change our dealer relationships. We are going to pull our brand in-house. If you want to buy a piece from us in New York City, you open an account with the company. You form a relationship with us. We know everything about you, you know everything about us, and you petition a purchase. And you fill out that form and you become part of the family of AP. Now, that's really interesting, because you leave off a whole bunch of ex-partners out there
It's tough.
that built your brand,
Past 100 years, all
and
these
they're
brick and mortar
out
locations.
of their minds pissed off. But does this mean, and this is the question for all of us talking about this, has the brand become so huge that people are willing to twist and turn and deal directly with you forever? They don't care that there's no dealers anymore. They're willing to find AP to buy AP. Have we got there? And I'd argue, I think they pulled it off.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So I think you bring up some good points about this whole authorized dealer model. And when you're looking at just what's happening with a lot of these brands, is for one, they're probably pulling back for a couple reasons. One, for the last 100 years, they've built up this infrastructure to sell their watches, and how they see a sale is through selling the watch to that authorized dealer. And that's how they basically are measuring their sales metrics. But what's happening is a lot of these authorized dealers are not able to actually push that inventory. And what's happening is it's going into the gray market.
Right.
And the perceived value is going down. So I think this is a reaction to
Do
two
you think
things.
Audemars went through that decision?
I think that was one thing they were thinking about. I also think that they're probably just thinking about the buyer relation, like the actual buyer transaction. They never really own the customer relationship, especially because it's never been on the digital front. A brand like Patek, they just started showing prices of their watches online a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
It's so behind in a lot of ways, but of course the ways that you sell these watches is going to be different. But I think that's all a reaction to all these different things. The way in which they have the sales channel developed right now is not optimized for how people are buying watches, especially these coveted pieces. They're surfing the internet. They're just looking for an opportunity to get them. They're pulling back that, and they also want to take ownership of that buyer relationship, in my opinion.
Do you agree that AP pulling it in-house was a smart move for the next 10 years? What do you think? That's the question.
What I would have done is I would have found and told our plan to our authorized dealers, the people that have committed to us for the last 50 to 100 years, and said, hey, this is what we're going to be doing. In order for you to be a part of this, this is what we need from you. And
So,
kind of set those guidelines instead of pulling back.
I'm speculating now, but let me tell you what I think
Okay.
is going to happen. There are certain relationships that are so strong in the bond that Audemars has with certain dealers. Let's take London Jewelers. I mean, they have been an AP dealer before the beginning of time. Now, my guess is what's going to happen is AP is going to keep them as a dealer if they build their own boutique within London Jewelers. This is what I speculate is going to happen. My guess is AP will own 51%, and probably London Jewelers will have to pay for the build-out. But they will keep their status as an authorized dealer for a brand that nobody gets to sell, which is a very coveted deal. And so maybe, and I know there's lots of dealers that I talk to that are pissed off as hell.
Yeah.
They're losing the relationship to something that's so, we'll see what happens. But in the next 12 months, let's see what happens. And my bet is maybe there'll be 2 in America, one in Texas, one in New York.
So like a boutique, yeah.
Yeah, and of course AP themselves.
And it's funny because the brands like On the Table can operate how they want to operate. The rest of the brands are going to have to find different ways to reach consumers because the demand is not the same.
Yeah.
Like if I'm going to buy a brand that's not Rolex, AP, or Patek,
Well,
it's a totally different transaction
You brought up
experience.
such an interesting business case that I am going to probably focus on the AP model in the business press. I'm so fascinated by it. And I'm sure the execs will come out and talk about it. I've been asking them about this decision. There's been lots of executive changes there in the last little while. They have a vision. They have a whole design globally. I think their brand has transcended itself up to one of the 3 pillars.
I totally agree. And when we talk about the Holy Swiss Trinity, I think they're part of it. And I think another brand, Alanga and Zona, great brand as well. But I think an interesting dynamic here that I'm finding, when I'm looking at a successful watch brand and a luxury goods brand, I think it comes down to complete ownership and understanding of your supply chain and understanding how it intermingles with demand and price in the marketplace. Patek is so good at this. They raise their prices, the demand doesn't go away. They understand the marketplace and it's a complete Veblen good.
Do you think a maker must make their own movement to be a real brand?
From the consumer side, I think in-house movements are very overrated. I think they're very overrated. But if I am paying a premium of $15,000 to $20,000, how can you sell me you're not even producing your own movements? The heart of a watch.
I've done a lot of soul searching on it, and I agree with you. I want them to own the angst of building the movement and owning the maintenance of the movement and designing new movements. That to me is what the soul of the watchmaker is. And when you commoditize the movement and you buy it from a third party as an OEM relationship, you will never be a coveted brand, in my view.
I agree, and I think it also is based on price as well. I think there are brands that have been able to interchange, or like a brand like Breitling, for example. They have a lot of lower caliber pieces that are maybe using ETA-based movements, which allows them to appeal to a larger audience, but you have to be vertically integrated in some way where you can produce from start to bottom just your own movements in-house.
You mentioned Richard Mille.
Yes, please.
So this weekend at my lake house, I had a huge advocate, was wearing a piece, brought the brand book. We spent hours going through it. I've been looking at the brand for 2 years now. I don't understand it enough. When I get into a brand, I know every movement. I know the history of it. I know every design. I know the history of the design. I know it before I make my first purchase. This is an interesting company. As you know, AP bought 10% of the company. You didn't know that?
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. That to me sent a really big signal that I better dig in here and understand what's going on. So those are very expensive watches. They're sort of in the 80 to 500,000 range. They make very few. And I started trying them on and looking at them, trying to find the one that would be for me with a red band. And they have some very...
They actually have a lot. That might be a brand for you.
And they use a lot of eclectic materials. So
carbon fibers, different precious metals.
I'm starting my journey into that collection. And I have not yet made my decision, but I'm going to do some investigating. That's next on the hit parade.
They're making about 5,000 units a year.
They haven't made it yet. They've sort of been saying they're going to make 5,000. They get to 4,200, and it's a good year.
Yeah, I think they've only been around since like 2001 or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, they're very short life cycle, but I don't know, is it going to be a flash in the pan? Is it going to be
Well, that's the
continuous?
question. You mentioned flash in the pan, but they've got Nadal wearing one. They've got Bubba Watson wearing one. They've gone this...
Nadal is wearing one, and they did not pay him to wear one. He just started wearing one in his tennis match.
But he smashed it to pieces with the forces, and they built a special one with shock absorber.
They started working together.
Same with Bubba Watson. It takes something like 25 G's on a swing or something, and it doesn't break.
And the rappers love them. Drake wears them. I think this whole pop culture element that a lot of these brands are disassociated from, and they don't even realize they're doing so much of a push on the marketing front.
Will it stand the test of time is the question, because these are very eclectic designs. But if they become classics, they deserve to be in a collection. There's no question about it. I mean, and I don't have one, and now we're talking about it. And I'm feeling that maybe in next season of Shark Tank, I should be wearing one. Because
Stay tuned, everybody.
People check my wrist on that show, say, what's he got on? There's a whole bunch of people emailing, say, I saw the Daytona, I saw the AP, I saw the Patek. Over and over again, that design is on. I did wear the Patek without a red band. It hasn't aired yet. I want to see how much craziness happens, because it'll be the first time in 10 years I didn't have a red band on. Because I can't put a red band on one of my favorite watches. But it was interesting.
I think it's a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. But I did talk to Patek about it, and they said, do not separate that band from that watch. It's part of what makes this watch what it is. So
I want to ask you another question. So we talk a little about the AD front, maybe speaking more to the authorized dealers themselves. You are a purchaser of watches at a high volume. I've asked this before to people that are purchasing a lot of watches. What could they do better? What could these authorized dealers do better for you as the consumer?
You know, I think what matters to me is I want to be, if I form a relationship, I don't have a lot of dealer relationships. I have two big ones that I consider I'm friends with the executives. I'm friends with the company. I put all my purchases through them. And I'll disclose it to you. It's Tourneau in New York. I think they're fantastic. They have a fantastic relationship, particularly with Rolex. And then London Jewelers, I think the team there is spectacular. And we've even filmed in these locations. What I care the most about with those, and I'll say this on behalf of every buyer of watches, you need to communicate with me what's going on. I'm so interested in everything that if something's coming down the pipe, send me the information. If a watch is being delayed, I need to know. If there's a controversy out there, connect with me. You have my email address. I'm even interested if you call me, because I'm never going to stop buying watches. So I think what they're not doing right is, I walk in, I buy a watch, we have a relationship, I don't hear from them again. And there's other dealers I bought watches from. I have to, tip out to the Rolex guys on Rodeo Drive, because they helped me out on a last-minute basis.
Nice.
I needed a specific Rolex, and they were able to get one in 48 hours to shoot with. So I was appreciative of that. But it shouldn't be that you date one night, buy a watch, and you're not married. To me, once you buy a watch from a dealer, you're married. You have to have a dialogue, and they should be reaching out constantly with new information, and they're not, and I think it's a mistake. Because look, the more I know, the more knowledgeable I am, the more I'm likely to buy something.
And I think one thing I'm sure we can agree on, the hunt for the watches, I think, is just as fun as actually getting the watch for me.
It's crazy fun.
It's amazing.
It's crazy fun. So
I have some questions for you, though, from the Facebook group. Can we go through those? We may make these a little bit quicker. So these are the questions that people had for you about watches. So and I think this is a really interesting one. If all watches were publicly traded companies, all publicly traded companies, you had to buy shares in one of them, only one, which one and why?
Oh.
What do you think?
Boy, that's a tough question.
It's a good question, though, right?
Oh, my goodness. I only get to choose one?
Only choose one.
Oh. Okay, that is the best question I've ever been asked, because it's...
I adjusted it a little bit, so I'll take a little credit.
But that is really...
it's got to be one of these on the table, right?
Of course, but I'd want to buy shares in all three, but if I could only buy one, I have to buy Rolex.
Rolex, why?
The longest history of value creation on Earth for a watch. They're it. If you think of the success of the Rolex brand in watches,
regardless of watches, just brand in general, it's just so much.
And I'm a brand person, so that's the answer. But that was a very painful question. I do not appreciate that.
Sorry, I did not mean to put you
No, but
in
the
pain.
point is, I love Patek. Yeah. I love AP.
Yeah.
I'm sick now. I'm unhappy. Okay.
All right, let's try to lighten up the mood a little bit. All right, so what about the cheapest watch you actively wear? Is there one that you actively wear? What's the cheapest one?
I do. It's a British aeronautics watch, Beaumont. I have two of them because...
like a Bremont?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know the brand, but what happened was I was working with a stylist 7 years ago on Shark Tank, and he loved these watches for a photo shoot I was going to make. So he said, Kevin, I know the brand, and I said, I know nothing about them. He arranged for me to buy two of them, and I still wear them. They're really remarkable watches. They were not expensive.
Yeah.
But that's
a couple $1,000s probably.
Yeah, and even my son likes them. They're beautifully made. They've got a history of aeronautics to them. But I don't even know how to pronounce the brand.
Bremont, yeah.
Yeah.
Bremont.
Yeah.
There we go.
There you go. That's
cool.
The cheapest
All right,
watch
there we go. There's the answer there.
Yeah.
All right, next question. I think I want to adjust this even more. If you had to pick one watch for your co-stars on Shark Tank, what would you get them? How about this? Let's add some more drama to it. You have to pick one shark to buy a watch for, and you have to pick a watch for them. Which shark would you go for and give them a watch, and what watch would you give them?
Well,
I like to add more drama. I like because it's no fun if you pick them all. Then it's just a giving parade. We need to pick one.
I would never be seen dead with, an Apple Watch. So I'd put an Apple Watch on all of them. That's it. It's just, and then they can all be 20% off retail the minute they get to the set. When you put, and I love the Apple company, and I own some shares in it, and I use their equipment, but you put an Apple Watch on your wrist, you're probably going to burn in hell. That's That's probably what's going to happen. And
All
so,
right.
you know, you can't put that thing near me. That's just like, that is not a watch. That is a piece of consumer, you know what, and it does not belong on your wrist. It says everything that's wrong about, you know, timepieces. You don't commoditize a watch, take its soul away, and stick it on a million people's wrists and everybody looks the same. And by the way, you can't tell the time until you wake it up. How dumb is that?
Couple follow-ups to that, because I think from a consumer front, and talking about Apple, one thing I'll say in their defense is I think they are getting people into watches because they have just gotten people familiar with things on their wrists. For me, that was actually I own an Apple Watch. I used to own an Apple Watch, and it got me comfortable with wearing things on my wrist. So I think it can be a pathway. In terms of just the Apple Watch in general,
So
though,
you're saying you put it on, you start to
I think
enjoy
it's a gateway. It's like a gateway to the feeling.
It's a great
to the
idea,
feeling.
except you run the risk of losing your soul. That's the problem. You put it on your wrist, all of a sudden you're a hollow person with no soul. That's it. Now maybe if you take it off, your soul comes back, but there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
That's what
so
I
no,
say. The
no
risk
Apple
is.
Watch for you. No way.
I mean, in a nightmare that would happen. I mean, sometimes.
How much would I have to pay you to wear an Apple Watch for a day?
There is no amount of money. I would never do that because I am worried about losing my soul.
Well, soul, that's timeless. That's eternal.
Sorry to tell the truth.
Yeah, well, there we go. I don't think anybody's actually going to disagree with you. My audience loves mechanical watches. So, all right, we have a ton of watches on the table.
Yeah.
What's next? What's next? For you. I mean, what can you possibly want?
You know,
Talk about Richard Mille, but like, is there anything else? that's
yeah,
on your mind?
I probably will dip into Richard's watches. I want to go meet the man first. I want to talk to him. I talk to all the execs of these companies. I enjoy hearing their vision for where they want to go.
Mm-hmm.
But watches consume probably, in my day, I bet 10% of my waking hours talking to people about
Really?
watches, getting phone calls from people about watches, people asking me how to get watches, you know, stopping me, you know, in airplanes talking about watches. I can't. I mean, I'm done. You know, I just love watches. What do you do when you're infected this way?
It's a sickness, but it's a beautiful
great
sickness.
That's why we're here. We can't stop talking. We have to edit this tape.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're gonna have to probably cut this down. We're gonna have to cut
absolutely.
this down. But this was a lot of fun. And in terms of just letting people know, because I know everybody knows you from the TV, but where can people find you maybe digitally? Because I see you posting more videos. Where can they go to interact with you?
You'll see a lot of my thoughts on watches at my YouTube page,
Okay.
Mr. Wonderful.
Great.
And so I'm also doing a whole series on. I'm a chef, and I'm cooking with fashion. So I'm bringing watches into the kitchen, marrying. For example, I just did a dish. I'll be on the Today Show cooking a dish next Monday.
All right.
And because I'm doing a very delicate grill of Brussels sprouts, I'm going to be taking the Hulk, where are you, Hulk, and using that, here we go, because I'm marrying on my wrist will be the Hulk, I'll be cooking the beautiful green and cutting up the green Brussels sprouts, and I want to marry the fashion with the watch, bringing cooking, so Chef Wonderful is getting together with Mr. Wonderful to do a kind of a combination. And I love cooking, so it's, you know, sort of cooking with style, cooking with flair, having that je ne sais quoi, you know, whatever it is, watches are part of it.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, this is a lot of fun.
Thank
I'd love
you.
to do it again.
Thank you.
Pleasure talking with you.
It was great, thanks.
Awesome.